For context, I'm female and was 25 at the time, living with my housemate Tony and his 13-year-old son Ben. I was working nights and would sleep during the day while Tony was at work and Ben was at school. One day I woke up to my bedroom door slowly opening, stopping half open. I was half asleep still and it took me a minute to wake up. Although strange he opened my bedroom door, I assumed it was Tony, home from work early. I called out, "Tony," and I heard a noise in the house. Still half asleep, I casually wandered out to look around, but no one was home. I was confused, but thought maybe I hadn't shut my door properly and it had somehow slowly come open. Or maybe I didn't shut it properly to begin with and had dreamt it was opening. I went back to sleep and told Tony and Ben about it that afternoon. Ben then realized his PlayStation was gone. We looked around and found Ben's bedroom window screen had been forced open from the outside. I realized the way they opened my door that they must have seen my feet on the bed and so stopped entering my room and left. I figured it must have been some teenage kid since they took the PlayStation, and we filed a police report, but we weren't really that stressed about it. A few days later, it was my day off during the week and I went out shopping. When I got home, the place was a mess and had been proper robbed. I looked around and found our biggest kitchen knife on the floor by the door inside my bedroom. This time the guy had broken in through the kitchen window, grabbed the knife and checked my room, leaving the knife there once finding out I wasn't home, before taking a bunch of stuff. Was he going to stab me if he found me asleep again? Why not just check the house and leave if he saw my feet again? Why even risk coming back to the same house? We didn't have particularly valuable stuff. He consciously decided he would confront me with a knife this time if I was home? I was pretty terrified and we ordered security cameras, but nothing else ever happened. So stabby robber, let's not meet. When I first moved out of home, I moved into a studio apartment that was basically just a loft accessed via a garage. My house key was literally just a garage remote that had previously been inhabited by my friend Claire. She was moving interstate and needed someone to take over the lease. The rent was incredibly cheap. It seemed like a steal, so I moved in. The landlord, John, seemed like a fairly odd guy. He just had a weird vibe about him. Claire told me that he was in the SAS back in the UK. He talked a lot and came over constantly. He'd often just be there in the garage when I got home and talk my ear off. But again, the rent was cheap, so I moved in. After the first week, I noticed that there were cameras attached to the ceiling, facing the bed. If they'd been there when I first moved in, I hadn't noticed them. I contacted John and he told me that they were just part of the security system he hadn't set up yet, and weren't actually plugged in or connected. I didn't believe him. I tried to kind of joke about it and said that even if they weren't plugged in, I felt like they were looking at me, so could we please remove them? And he agreed. I still behaved for the rest of my time there as though there were hidden cameras because I assumed there were. Living there was pretty nerve-wracking. John would show up at all hours to use the garage downstairs, so I'd get woken up early in the morning by hearing my front door open with no idea who was entering unless I poked my head down the ladder. Yes, I accessed my house via a ladder. He'd be down there doing God knows what with power tools at 8 in the morning on a Sunday. One weekend, I went to stay with my boyfriend. I was gone the whole weekend. When I returned, someone had stayed at my house. My bed was disheveled and there were short black hairs all over my white pillow, like someone had shaved or just had a short haircut then slept on it. In the bathroom, my towel and floor mat were damp, but the weirdest part was that someone had used my toothbrush. I am a bit of a weirdo when it comes to dental hygiene, and I am absolutely meticulous about the state of my toothbrush. It needs to be absolutely spotless after use and placed standing up, not touching anything. It was lying on the edge of the sink in a puddle of water covered in bits of toothpaste, like someone had used it and only half bothered rinsing it. To this day, I can't imagine what would possess someone to use somebody else's toothbrush. I moved out shortly after, but during that time I barely slept a wink and would sleep hugging a heavy wooden baseball bat like it was a teddy bear. So John, thanks for making my first experience out of home so weird and scary. Let's not meet. When I was in high school, my girlfriend lived in Topanga Canyon, which is a pretty bizarre place filled with bizarre people. Well, one night I was leaving her house and I had to walk down the road to get to my car. Road in quotes because most of Topanga's houses are accessed by barely single-lane cracked tar roads with stumps and stuff coming up through them. It's like a 10-minute walk down the hill, and I get to my car and get in. It's pitch black. I sit there for a moment, and before I turn my car on, I hear a noise. Thinking it was an animal, I didn't move. How am I supposed to know if a bear or a mountain lion can break into a 1990 Volvo? I hear the noise past the car, but I don't see anything. Literally nothing. I freeze. After about 5 minutes, I decided that if it was something dangerous, it would have stopped. So I turn on the car, I switch on my headlights and drive the rest of the way down the hill. That's when I saw them. As I turned onto a wider road, I see two people with black cloths draped over their entire bodies. No shoes, walking slowly down the road in the direction I'm driving. The cloths must have been velvet or similar because they were pitch black even as my headlights passed across. I gunned it around them and turned onto the main road and watched my rearview mirror as my taillights' red color faded on their forms. I then realized that if I had left my girlfriend's house about 30 seconds later, I would have literally walked into two people wearing jet black, walking slowly in total darkness in the middle of the night in Topanga. Just got a shiver thinking about that. This happened to me a few years ago while I was still in college. But I've been watching a ton of those narrated true stories on YouTube and felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish and was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived it seemed to be common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room, and especially since, for those who aren't familiar with terrace houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now, I'd been living there for a few months, and I could recognize a difference in the sound of someone walking past on the path and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house as both my housemates were away from home for the weekend. This was a little unusual since neither of them usually went home except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time or something similar. It was about 1 in the morning and I was lying in bed and on the phone to my boyfriend at the time, as we were long distance. As we were talking, I could hear some footsteps outside and immediately recognized that it was someone right outside the door. I kept listening and could just hear them shuffling around a bit, and then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me, and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a quick look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I get up and part the curtains and quite literally press my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the streetlights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at, but whoever it was who was outside was doing the exact same thing I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me, inches away. I didn't scream, I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me. And I remember feeling like someone had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. I couldn't see his face properly, but I just remember he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend and then rang the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, and I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At the time, I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window even with the curtains drawn. So I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or a squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, seeing 3 girls living alone, and thought maybe this would be an easy burglary, or worse. But thank God it didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after. I remember staying up until the early morning just watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone, until I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call for or go and stay with. And it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's dark outside. Before I start, here's a bit of context to my story. My husband and I lived in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the side of the house, which opens up into the laundry room. When we're too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook his collar onto a long line that's attached to one of the pipes on the corner of our house so we can use the bathroom. We used to do this from the front door in our laundry room, but we'd noticed the large step from the door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting him out through the front door instead, since the porch is much closer to the ground. This particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight when I decided to let him outside one last time before going to bed. I hug him up to his line, close the door, and lock it, before heading into the kitchen to put away the dishes. This was pretty routine. Even if he used the bathroom quickly, he liked to walk around along the front and side of the house for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door, how my dog signals he wants to come in, so I head over to let him back in. Since I've watched way too many scary movies, I always look through the door's peephole before opening the door. Out of habit, I look to check that my dog is in front of the door. Instead, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. I freeze with my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch. This one louder than the last. This kind of wakes me up from my initial shock, and I run to grab my cell phone. I call my husband to tell him what's happening. He was very confused. I probably wasn't explaining the situation very well, but says that he's heading home. This is when I realize my dog is still outside with this person. I head back to the front door, trying to make as little noise as possible to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed, looking at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as possible. I can't see my dog anywhere, and the side of my house is covered in gravel, so I knew I couldn't step outside without making a lot of noise. With my heart still pounding in my chest, I go to the front door to keep an eye on the stranger and to get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel that they would take me seriously, since all this man was doing was standing in front of my house. I tried taking a picture of him with my cell phone, but my camera was only able to take pictures of the peephole and not the images behind the glass. All of a sudden, the man looks up directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me, then opens his mouth to show this taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few seconds. With that, he turns around and starts to walk down the street. I stay in the same place, almost expecting him to rush back and start pounding on the door. Luckily, my husband got back after a few minutes. Long story short, he convinced me to call the police, and we went out looking for our dog. It turns out this man had cut the end of the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided this was a good time for him to explore my neighbor's backyard, which was where we found him. It's been 3 years since this happened. We've since moved to a new house, unrelated reasons, and the police weren't able to come up with any suspects. Ever since then, we take our dog on very long walks before the sun goes down.